Welcome to the Abundant Life Family Podcast. I'm Bill.
And I'm Jen.
We're the Hildebrands, and we're helping to build families that last. Today we have with us Brandon and Susan Fields, and we're going to talk about parenting tips and treasures. Well, Jen, I'll tell you what, good parenting doesn't just happen.
It's true.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And just like playing guitar, it takes a lot of practice. You have to do a lot of things over and over, and you have to learn. You have to learn new techniques and styles and things. Well, today we get to have Brandon and Susan.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be talking about tips for parenting and some of the tips that you guys have learned. But first, I want to hear about you. I want to hear about your family.
Yeah, so I'm Brandon, and this is my wife, Susan. We have 3 boys.
We are boy parents.
So we have 3 boys. They're aged 5, 3, and our youngest one will be 1 in a couple weeks. We've got a birthday party coming up, so we're excited for that.
Yeah.
Do you have a theme for that birthday party?
Do we have a theme yet?
I don't think so.
It's a birthday party.
It's the third
Well
one.
done. Yeah, I know. Exactly. Good point. Absolutely.
Well, tell me about you guys. How long have you been married? Just a little about your story.
Yeah, so we got married in 2016.
Okay.
We've been also going to Abundant Life since 2016, and I'm very lucky to be there. We met in pharmacy school, not necessarily through classes, but through the campus ministry at our pharmacy school we went to. So it's a great place to meet.
And then you met, you got married in 2016, and you both became pharmacists, living on, dual incomes, no kids. Wasn't that called dinks?
That's what we used to. I don't know if they say that anymore,
Okay,
hun.
well, way back when we were there, but then you started having kids and you made a few choices to change things in your life, your lifestyle. What was some of that?
Yeah, like you said, we were both pharmacists, making a lot of money. And at the time we had bought our forever home, or at least our 20 plus year home. And we're so
still
excited.
working on that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were loving it. It's a great
Yeah.
home for us. And then our first child came, Beckett, and he kind of turned our world upside down. We both like to plan, have things organized, neat, and with a newborn baby, that usually doesn't work out very well. So we quickly found out that he was kind of in charge of our schedule now, in a way. And so one of the big decisions we ended up making was to downsize our home, to move into a smaller home. And the reason why we made that decision, I guess there were a few reasons that we'll talk about. I was listening to a podcast called Dad Tired.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great podcast. They have some really good episodes, but for the most part, it's just dads challenging dads to become better dads.
I listened to that one too.
And so this particular podcast, he was saying that their goal as a husband and wife was to work part-time. So whether that meant his wife stays home, he works 40 hours, or he stays home, she works 40 hours, or they both work part-time, 20 hours each. And the reason why they had that goal was because they wanted to be able to love each other well, love their family well, love their neighbors well. It's, the great commandment. And so they decided that they wanted to move down to part-time. And that really challenged me. I was, in a way, convicted to get there myself, because we were both working 40 hours a week. Our son was going to daycare. It was just kind of taking a toll. And so that's how the Lord was working in my life at that time. And
at the same time, I felt like the Lord was calling me to stay home full time and homeschool our kids. And so it was a really difficult decision for us for a number of reasons. First of all, we didn't have a clue what homeschooling even looked like. And we, like you said, we found out that we had to downsize our home because we had a lot of student debt at the time. And we wanted to be able to pay that off to get to a place where we had some more financial freedom. And we had also received some criticism. To a lot of people, our decision looks like we're going backwards instead of making more money, becoming more successful from a worldly perspective. And that I was essentially like wasting my education or my earning potential. And so it was really a time of testing and refining for us. We had to decide whether we were going to live for the applause of man, or if we were going to live in such a way that one day when we stand before the King of Kings, we want to hear him say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Were we pursuing God's kingdom first, or are we trying to build our own? Did we really have all of our trust in the Lord, or was it in him plus our income? Did we love our house more than we loved obeying God,
Yeah.
And so in the end, we decided to obey and to trust that the Lord was going to guide us every step of the way and that he was going to equip us for what he called us to do. And we found that he's just really blessed us through that, taking that step of obedience. And one of those ways just being that we get to spend so much time with our kids.
Yeah.
And, I know for a lot of young families, it's like a really exhausting, like I spend so much time with my kids, and we get that. It's not been easy for us. We had 2 babies with colic, and it was extremely difficult. And there are times even now that we need some time alone where it's quiet, that we can recharge. But at the same time, when we look back on our life, we will never regret spending more time with our kids. So what felt like at first a big sacrifice we were making was ended up being like us receiving a gift from the Lord.
In 40 years of ministry, I've never heard somebody say, "I wish I would have spent more time at the office instead of with my family."
Right.
That is something you'll never regret. And I'm listening to you guys and hearing a lot of our own story. Just, we both had incomes. We both worked full-time school teacher and youth pastor. And when our first was born, went through the same process and decided the same thing, for you to stay home and be with the kids.
Yeah. And having to make a lot of adjustments, adjusting, our car payment, what kind of cars we're going to buy, the furniture, putting everything on a budget, all those things, in order to make that happen, and learning how to adjust, and then, really heeding the truth of learning how to be content. And so that was just, that's just a little touch of our journey as well. And so we resonate with that.
Well, at the core of this whole decision, I know it was for us anyway, but at the core lies your own relationship with Jesus. Tell me about how you guys came to know the Lord.
Yeah, I can go first. So I grew up in the Catholic Church and went through the sacraments, baptism, first communion, confirmation. I can say that I didn't have a relationship with the Lord. And to be honest, I didn't know much about the Bible. I just kind of, did the things. And so at the time I was getting into competitive baseball. And so I had a decision to make throughout high school, whether my college career was going to be focused around playing baseball or academics. And I was really torn by this decision. And I remember one night laying in bed and I prayed to God, "God, will you show me what you want from my life?" And so even though I didn't have a relationship with him, there was something in me that knew there was a God, knew he was there, knew he was listening. And didn't receive any audible answer or anything like that. But I ended up choosing academics and going to Drake University to study pharmacy. And one of the neat things about Drake University is you have what's called a first-year seminar. And so it's kind of like an intro class to warm you up for college. And so they give you this list, this packet of classes with course descriptions. And they tell you, make sure you read the course descriptions because this is very important. But I was too cool for that. And so
Oh no.
you sign up for 3 to 5 courses that you're interested in, and they try to give you, your top choice, but for sure within the top 5. And so I signed up for a class called All Rivers Run to the Sea because I thought it was about geography. I'm like, the world's a cool place. I want to learn more about the world. And I remember a week before college starts, I get an email from the professor, and it outlines the required text for the class. And the number one text was the Bible.
Wow.
And I could feel my heart racing. I could feel my face getting hot and red. I remember running downstairs to grab that packet of course descriptions, and sure enough, I signed up for a class about the Bible without even knowing about it. And it's titled "All Rivers Run to the Sea." It's a quote from Ecclesiastes. And at Drake University, you are put on campus in the dorms on the same floor as the people in your class. And so I was placed on a floor with 20 to 30 of probably the only freshman Christians at all of Drake University, which is a very liberal school. And they loved me very well.
You didn't know what you were doing.
No.
But God did.
But God did. That's
Yes,
great.
Yeah. And so it's really cool to look back on me praying that night in my bed and how God has been so faithful to answer that prayer, even when I was far from him. And so, that's what God's done for me.
You got to grow in your relationship that semester as you went through
that whole first year. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's right, because you were on the same floor with those same guys.
The class lasted a semester, but I was living life with these men and women for a year, and then ended up being 5 or 6 years. So, yeah. And
you had mentioned another time when we were talking that these guys, they treated you like community. They accepted you. They were your friends, real friends. And that was part of how God really reached your heart that way. Yes. That's pretty cool. Yes. Well, how about you, Susan?
Yeah, so my parents divorced when I was young. And so I was raised by my dad and my grandparents. My grandparents were very involved in their church. So I grew up going to church with them. So from a very young age, I believed that Jesus was my savior, but it was more of like a golden ticket mentality of like, he's my golden ticket to heaven, But I was very much living selfishly and only doing the Christian thing if it was convenient for me. But never when it was hard or an inconvenience. And then it wasn't until college, I was a part of that same campus ministry, that I saw kids my age really taking ownership of their faith. That wasn't their parents dragging them to church. And so being surrounded in that community really challenged me as to like, where was I going to stand? What was I going to do? And so that was when I really surrendered my life to Jesus as Lord of my life and not just my Savior.
That's amazing too. And so as you're growing in the Lord, growing in a family, and you downsize, you move to this new neighborhood, and as you're getting to know the neighbors, you met somebody that really impacted you.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was running an errand one day. So we had been praying because we moved to this new neighborhood. We wanted to have community with people that were in a similar life stage as us. And so we had been praying that, and I went on this errand. I was driving in my car, and I drove down our street, and I saw this girl in an Abundant Life t-shirt pushing a stroller. But I kept driving because I was like, she's probably going to be freaked out if this all black SUV with tinted windows stops on the side of the road to like shout at her from inside my car. So I kept driving, kind of bummed that like the opportunity was there, but just the timing wasn't quite right. So then as I was coming back home, though, I saw her, same girl, right across the street from our house. So I parked the car and I got out, and then I shouted at her from across the street, like, hey, I love your shirt. And so then from there, we exchanged numbers, and it was Haley Ward. So we got to know also her husband, Billy Ward. And then eventually he introduced us to his parents, Bill and Karen Ward, who have been leading this parenting class called Growing Kids God's Way for about 30 years now. Yeah. And we got to meet the rest of their kids, who are all great people. And we were like, we want to do what they did. And if you talk to Bill and Karen for any amount of time and you have kids, you'll be hearing about growing kids God's way. So they took us through the class, and it was pretty transformational for our family.
It's pretty impactful when you meet somebody who is doing a great job with their own kids, right? And so you saw this family raise their kids a certain way, and they've got 5 adult kids now, and they all love the Lord.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Many of them are married and have kids of their own.
Yeah.
And they're teaching them the same type of program and how to parent. Well, I've been hearing great things about you guys as well, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to sit down with you guys and get to talk and learn. So I wanted to just talk about some of the tools that you use even as parents with 3 boys, 5, 3, and 1. Boy, you got to have a tool bag.
Yeah, a pretty big one.
You got to have a real one, but you got to have a tool bag for them too. And I like to use that illustration just because I like to fix things. And so I've got tool bags. I got one in every car. And if I was to pull one out of the trunk, I could pull out a pair of pliers and screwdriver and all these different tools. As parents, we've got to have tools that we know how to use and are ready to use. And so church is just one of those tools. And we tell people that Abundant Life or whatever church you attend, that's a tool for you to use. That youth group is a tool as you raise teenagers. But you've got 3 boys, and I just wanted to talk with you about a few of the tools that you've learned to use. So tell me.
And I'm going to interject.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is when I was a brand new mom and we had our firstborn, I just felt at such a loss.
That's right.
And I didn't find a Haley Ward. So I remember distinctly going into a bookstore and kind of just holding this colicky baby thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. And the Lord just led me to this book. And this book, and which is going to be many of the things that you're going to talk about, was life-changing also for our family. And so a lot of the tips that you're going to give were the same ones that we did. And it was, I don't know, but it was like the Lord just saving me and just throwing me this life preserver. And I grabbed onto it and just read everything. Yeah. So I'm excited to hear how it also impacted you all.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll start by talking a little bit about Growing Kids God's Way, the class.
Okay.
Because in your analogy of having a tool bag, it's like the tool chest, or at least it has been for us. And so it's like a big, great book full of tools for parents. And if I'm being honest, whenever we were first introduced to taking the class, we were struggling with our 2.5-year-old with obedience, and we were kind of, desperate for answers to the point where we were going and seeking counsel, and it didn't seem like a lot of things we were doing were working. And so we heard about this class called Growing Kids God's Way. And at the same time, I was desperate, but also skeptical. Like, how is there this book of information about parenting that works, that isn't public knowledge? Like, how is that possible? But I even remember saying, like, I don't know what I'm going to learn, but I'm so desperate. I'm going to find out. And boy, was I wrong, because there was a lot of knowledge in this course about growing your kids and their relationship with the Lord, and then all these tools with how to do that. And so a couple of the tools that we really enjoy and want to share, I really enjoy this tool called the interrupt courtesy. And so if you're having a conversation with someone else, it could be a peer, an elder, it could even be a child. So imagine you're having a conversation and your kid wants your attention. So instead of them coming and saying, Dad, guess what? And like, to be honest, it's not worth interrupting the conversation most of the time. And so instead of doing that, they've learned that they can just come and gently put their hand on my arm or on my hand. And that's them signaling to me that I have something to tell you. And it's such like a blessing and a breath of fresh air when they do this, because I can come to a stopping place in my conversation, or maybe even finish the conversation and then address them. And so It helps them to be patient and to wait for a response, but it also shares the gospel. Jesus wants us to respect people, to love people well. And so by teaching our boys to do this, they are showing the person I'm talking to, I respect you. I humble myself before you. I'm not the important one here. And I'm going to let you finish your conversation. And
That's really good. That's powerful. I know
Yeah.
you picked that up.
Yeah, it
and
was one of my favorite ones
helped
too.
helped us to use that with our kids.
Tremendously. Yeah.
But that's awesome. Tell us another tool.
Yeah. So another one is just requiring a verbal response when we give them instructions. So saying, yes, mom, yes, dad, instead of complaining and arguing, which is like their default mode, right? And so that has helped our kids with obedience quite a bit. It stirs up their conscience. They don't want to make themselves out to be a liar once they've already verbally agreed to do it.
So give an example of that.
So an example would be, we struggled with bedtime routine.
Okay.
So you tell your kids it's time to get ready for bed, and then they grumble and complain because they're having fun playing or they're watching their favorite show. Nobody wants bedtime. So it's, it's a pain. And so now we say, okay, boys, it's time to get ready for bed. And if they verbalize yes, mom, or yes, dad, then their conscience is called into action. And so they're more likely to go to the bathroom and start, getting ready for bed, starting the bedtime routine. And so it stirs up their conscience. It's really what it's doing, but they have no clue that that's what's happening.
That's really good too. Yeah. Very good.
I remember one of my, I don't know if it's part of this curriculum, but a friend taught me that delayed obedience is disobedience. Right. And so, with 4 boys and they're all, and I'm trying to get them to go to bed or whatever, then I would say you need to obey, because when you delay or you don't do what I ask you to do when I'm asking you, that really is disobedience. And I remember my friend saying that when we were talking about it, she said, it really begins training your children to listen to when mom and dad say something, I obey it. Because our long-term hope and prayer for our children is that they will hear the voice of God speak to them, because he will. And, there's nothing more than we want for our children to hear our Father's voice and then to obey it. And we want them to obey it immediately. Yeah. And that made such an impact on me. And so that was kind of one of my favorite ones that we would implement with our boys. So, yeah.
There's one more tool that I really want to talk about, and that is, I love to hear from young couples who are implementing things in their own lives that seem to be against the culture, different from the culture. And right now we get to be so busy in our lives, and we keep saying yes to more and more stuff, but you got to draw the line somewhere. And so you guys made a commitment in your life to scale it down and slow down. What's that look like?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have around other young parents, is the busyness that's infiltrated our culture. And there's a really good book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yes.
And I would recommend anyone read it. He's a great author, a lot of great stories, a lot of humor. And there's even an audiobook read by himself, and it's really good. But he says that in order to love the Lord and love our neighbor, we need to slow down, because love takes time. And so if we want to be intentional with our kids, we hear this all the time. You have to be intentional. You have to be intentional.
Right.
But intentionality takes a lot of time. And so I challenge anyone to find some time, whether that's doing what we did and scaling back in our work. I have a very strict line I've drawn of, I'm going to work this much for the company I work for, and I'm probably not going to come in extra unless it's an emergency, and I understand that. But the rest of my time is my family time, and they are my number one priority. And so doing that can help. Sometimes we spend a lot of time on even good things. So ministry. But sometimes we need to look and decide whether that's taking time away from our kids. Obviously, there's time when we spend on things that aren't good or bad necessarily. So maybe watching the Chiefs. But if we do it too much, it's taking away time from our family. And then obviously there can also be bad things where we're spending time in sin, and those need to be cut out. So I know that there are some parents listening saying, well, we are barely making ends meet and we're both working 40 hours a week. And so then my challenge to you, like you said, Jen, would be to look at your finances.
Yeah.
Figure out where your money's going, because there is somewhere where you can cut. And for us, it was moving, which was a huge sacrifice at the time. For someone else, it may be selling their car and buying a cheaper car. For someone else, it could be cutting out their 20 subscriptions. But once you can cut money out of your budget, then you can scale back on your work and start to dedicate more of that time to your family.
That is so true. So true.
So powerful.
Now, Growing Kids God's Way has been a tool box really for you, providing a whole bunch of tools. And I know there's a number of different programs and ways that you can learn to parent your kids, but this has worked well for you guys. How can somebody listening to this, how can they be a part of Growing Kids?
Yeah, so Growing Kids, the ministry itself, has a website that you can go to join classes. Abundant Life has classes as well. So right now we have 3 classes going, and we run in the spring and in the fall. So anyone who's interested can sign up at livingproof.co. Right now it's on the Castles page, so
That's
/ Castles. But it is called Growing Kids God's Way. We lead it as an online course. So no matter where you are in the world, maybe you have to wake up in the middle of the night to join us, but anyone can join us. Anyone, even if you're not really affiliated with Abundant Life, anytime that we can influence and encourage a mom and dad to grow in their parenting, we will stop and do that.
So your session, you offer it on Tuesday nights, let's say. Is that what you do Tuesday night?
We do Tuesday
How
nights.
long is a session? Each Tuesday night is an hour and a half?
Typically somewhere around an hour and a half.
Okay.
Some a little shorter, some a little longer.
And then how many weeks does it go?
It runs for 17 weeks.
Okay.
And so it is a decent time commitment. And there's also book work during the week.
Okay.
But we like to explain that you have your kids for about 18 years. And so 17, 18 weeks of work is like investing 1 week, which is really 3 to 4 hours, for every year you get with your children. And so it's so worth it. You're not going to get that time back.
Yeah.
It's so worth it.
It's an investment. And raising a family takes an investment. We have to be on purpose raising our kids.
Yes.
And so I really appreciate just you guys sharing some tips and treasures from what you're learning. None of us is there yet, but we're all learning in this journey together. So thank you, Brandon, Susan. I really appreciate you being with us today. Can I pray with you before we go?
Absolutely.
So Lord, thank you for just being the one who brings to us some great wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And we want to do the best that we can raising our families. And even as we look at being grandparents now, Jen and I want to do the best that we can. And I know that we need to continue to add tools to our toolbox. So Lord, thank you for Brandon, for Susan, their 3 boys, and thank you for what they shared with us today. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Abundant Life Family Podcast. If you found this helpful for your family, hit like and subscribe below. And feel free to drop a comment or question below. To learn more about the Abundant Life Family Ministry and the 10-mile markers to help you win at building families that last, go to our website at livingproof.co/family.